Hello, welcome to the Big Scuba Show.
Hello, my name's Phil Shaw. I'm a cave explorer and a scientific diving safety officer, and I've been invited to join in with the Big Scuba podcast with Gemma and Ian. So we're going to talk about my 30 years history in the diving environments of the world.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Big Scuba podcast. My name is Ian. I will be your dive master for this episode. Welcome. I never do these things alone, probably for good reason. With me is my co-host.
Hello, my name's Gemma. Welcome to the Big Scuba podcast.
Yes, we are back with episode 170. Coming up on this episode, we are talking to the people at Deep.
Yes, we've recently had a visit, so we'll cover that.
We're also, I've got my dry suit back. I'm looking for recommendations. We'll get to that in a bit. And also, we've got a big congratulations to somebody who's been putting lots of work into their diving. So we'll get to that as well. Right from the top, we'll say this episode is sponsored by the lovely people at NDAC.com.
NDAC are specialists in the diving world, particularly in the technical and rebreather world. If you haven't found them yet, go to their website, www.NDAC.com.
Large enough to cope, small enough to care.
Absolutely.
That's NDAC. So we love those guys. And we want to say also, so right from the start, we want to say a really big thank you to everyone at Deep in Bristol who made us feel so welcome.
Absolutely. It was an amazing day. We went there last Thursday down to Bristol and we had a tour of the port side in Avonmouth and then went over to the campus, which was previously the NDAC diving site.
So let's give people a bit of history because not everybody will probably know much about that site, or actually, for the UK diving community, a lot of people do. And so go back a while back. That site has been a dive site since 2003.
Wow.
Which is pretty good. It was the former Day House quarry in Tiddenham. It was flooded in 1996, and it's really deep.
Yes, I didn't realise quite how deep. So
it was, I believe, at the time, the deepest recreational and tech diving site inland in the UK. And a lot of tech divers used it for training, and they could do their Tech 60 there. I believe some did the Tech 100, but you can't get to 100 metres there. So
the maximum depth, 80 metres.
Yeah, it depends on flow because it's fed by underwater springs.
Yes, yeah. So, but I've dived it once, and you've been there before as well.
Yeah. I dived it with Crystal Seas back in 2017, and we had a really good time. In fact, my dive buddy at the time was, I had two actually, Dave and also Matt.
Matt Rivet,
yes. Who previous guest and who we will speak about a bit later on as well.
Yeah.
And it was a great weekend. Now, we put a post up. Well, actually, let me go back a bit further. I've been following the Deep since really that came out public about what they were doing, the fact they'd bought the site.
Well, we need to NDAC actually closed. Was it 2020?
Yeah. And, it was closed and bought by Deep. By the people in charge of Deep, and because they've got plans, and we'll get to that in a bit. And there's a lot of discussion, at the dive sites. Oh, what's going on?
Who's brought it?
Who's got it? What's going on?
Was it military?
The Chinese are buying it, and then NASA's got it. They're going to be developing spaceships there, and
understandably, it's close to people's heart.
Of course it is, and it would be for any inland dive site. But here's the thing, there's other dive sites.
There are.
And there are, and we can name them, there's loads.
And we, the UK is an island. We are surrounded by amazing sea diving.
We like our inland lakes. They're great to go and dive, practice, do your skills, do your qualifications. and especially for people like us on the East Coast.
Absolutely, yeah.
We only get a short little window.
Yes, yeah.
And then we've got to haul our backsides to some other part of the country to get in the water.
Yeah.
Fine, but it's nice that we can go to our Gildenbergs and our Stoney and our
Fobsters, Cape and
Ray, and the list goes on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good. We get it. It's fine. But people, it's about the future. And
It is.
I can tell you, for all the people who've put comments on Facebook and things like that about, when's it coming open again? I'll go back. I get it, but I can assure you, and we'll get to it, and we've got some stuff coming out over the coming weeks. I can assure you, it absolutely fascinating. And when I walked into the warehouse,
Avonmouth,
Avonmouth, it was just like flip. And it does, honestly, I was a bit like a rabbit caught in the headlights a bit.
Yeah, it is staggering what they're doing.
Yeah, and so much positive energy, and it's about in very brief terms, it's about scientific research for the good of the oceans.
Yeah, and the future exploration.
Going much deeper than just diving.
Yeah, it's how we can access, explore, and actually inhabit these oceans at certain depths for the future, and it's all for the good of our planet and our future. So it's just history in the making. It's groundbreaking.
We walked out of there, no word of a lie, thinking, "Wow."
We did. It was just like an amazing day.
It's being run, and everyone we spoke to is full of energy, full of positive energy about what they're doing there, and there's good reasons why they haven't shared and couldn't share.
No, and there was stuff that obviously we couldn't even see on Thursday.
Of course, yeah.
It's all advancement and technology for these what they call the mission.
Yeah, and it's just absolutely amazing. Some of the stuff, and we took just on video alone, nearly 60 gigs of video, because there's a lot to do, cover.
Yeah.
And we're going to be sharing that over the coming weeks.
Yes, so we were invited by Phil Short, who is the research diving and training lead, and he accompanied us on our tour of the facilities, and it was, we just want to say a huge thank you for him letting us have
and if you know access. Phil Short, and if you're in the diving world and you've been following some of the stuff that Phil's done, such body recoveries, cave diving, you name it,
commercial diving,
it's in safe hands, and that you might not be able to dive it anymore, but it's going to good use, and that the future of diving, and particularly ocean research and everything else, that site is going to be used for good purposes.
Absolutely.
So which is really good, So get the feelings about not having a dive site in the UK anymore that, but think about the future.
Yes, I think open your mind to the future, and if you haven't looked at Deep, their website is a good place to start. Absolutely. For just seeing the actual extent. And
this is really easy website.
It's deep.com.
Go there.
And you can see all the people involved, and you might have heard various people that from our previous guests, like Kurt Kroc, he's involved, and obviously Phil Short is
we walked
amazing
around name. Actually for the first time. We never met Mark before, so Mark Caney,
yes, of Paddy.
I've been calling him Mark Carney.
Yeah,
so I got that wrong.
So just to put it in just perspective, so Ian and I were guests, and there was also an additional guest called Mark Caney,
who's from Paddy, industry relations and training executive. So he was going around, and he was like us. We're like, wow, this is awesome. So just briefly, again, we will share more about this over the coming weeks. we walked around and we were introduced to people, introduced to some of the managers and specialists who are working on site. And there's a big modern place they've got in Bristol. And inside, very all open plan, you've got computerized metal printers.
Yeah, like little, they're big robots, aren't they?
I didn't even know there was such a thing as a metal. But I've heard and seen plastic printers.
3D printing.
3D printing.
Yes, yeah.
But these were metal.
Yeah, and we saw one in action. They're called WAMs, weren't they?
Which are awesome. So they've got that engineering side things going on. And then you've got this huge, great big mock-up of the Sentinel living
habitat
systems, which will be like, if you go on Deep's website and look them up, and we just recently just done a short with it. It's this great big underground system that is going to be built, and that people will live in there and die from there on the bottom of the oceans.
Yeah, so Phil did a tour. It's a 2-story unit, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it had living quarters on, kitchen. We saw the moon pool. We saw all the safety contingencies. I think it was 2, 3, 4 different safety aspects to it.
Yeah. And that can be expanded. And the beauty of it is that the divers can go out with a saturation diver. They can go out with a telecoms and air
on an umbilical
up to 100 meters. They can do their research and exploration, what they're doing up to 100 meters. 6 people can live down there. Two will go out, 4 will be inside, and they'll explore that area around that pod or sentinel area. And then what they can do is that the system can then be picked up
and
moved along a bit, drop back down onto the bed, and they can explore that as well.
Yeah, and it is a modular setup so that you can add modules to this habitat.
Obviously, I've talked about them putting the thing on the sea floor. They're researching all this. So if it's a delicate sea floor, obviously they don't do that. They avoid that area.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of science going in. We're simplifying it for this.
Yeah. Then we also saw a wave machine,
which took me back. Have you ever seen Dam Busters? Because if you watch the Dam Busters film, and you've got his original machine where he lines up and he tests the theory of a bounce and bob. Similar looking thing.
Yeah, so that was it. There were pressure testing pots for testing equipment.
Yeah, sorry, Barnes Wallace, that's the name.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else did we see? We saw their creative director and their offices, and everything in the warehouse is set up so that it can be transferred over to the campus site. So it's all modular containers, but amazingly modern.
Yeah.
Open plan. What else did we do? We saw, obviously we had a nice lunch.
Yeah. Then we went to the actual old NDAC site, so the new campus.
Yep. So that again is in construction at the moment, but they have got the sub island where the submersibles will be launched from.
Yeah, that was really impressive. So they put a road going down. Not the old road that we used to go with the old transits and all that.
No, this was down
the road that go to the left of that, and to the right of that, and that goes to 40-ton floating pontoons.
Yeah,
which
incredible.
You stand on, and they don't move at all, do they?
No, and they've netted all the quarry face to obviously avoid any rock falls, and they're monitoring that all the time.
So they're monitoring the wildlife around it as well. So they're watching out because obviously they don't want rock falls, but they've got bats on site and they're being protected.
Yeah, mice as well, dormice.
Yeah. So, and where the pods used to be that NDAC used to rent out, they're gone, and that whole area and all that is all being managed for protection of the wildlife. Because you can't do this and say, well, I'm going to protect the oceans and stuff, then if you don't protect what's going on the land around.
Yeah.
And the whole ethos of deep is all about protection of the planet.
And that follows through to the actual physical sites.
Hence, when these, because one of the questions I had was like, well, what about companies like BP, and won't they want these pods to find new oil?
And it's not going to happen.
And that's wrote into the business plan that they won't be used for that at all. Purely science and exploration.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We want to say thank you to Chris Griffiths, who gave us the tour of the campus.
Yeah.
Really so enthusiastic. And so we went down to the waterside,
which was like a mirror.
It was super lovely
there was
day.
No wind, was it?
No, it was just tranquil. So a great weather window to see such an amazing sight.
Yeah, so that was really good. And then we were back to
Portside,
weren't we?
Mm-hmm.
To have a look at the submarines that they had there.
Yes, so we were really lucky. They've got both subs, Triton subs, M3K.
Glad you remembered that. But they could go down to 1,000 metres.
1,000 metres. We met a sub-pilot, Barry, who gave us his enthusiasm about where he'd been.
They were all taking the mick out of him, weren't they?
About his voice, because he's very Scottish.
Very Scottish.
So he spent some time with us. He used to work on a super yacht that had a sub on, so he was sub-pilot for the owners.
Yeah.
And then he's obviously now part of the team at Deep. So we actually got to sit in a sub.
I didn't know they had an ejection seat, did you?
No, you'll see this all in our videos. So, but yeah, again, that was, how many people can say...
What does that button do? What does that button do?
What's that rig? Yeah. But yeah, we're very privileged because
And they've got a handbrake.
They have, yeah, thrusters and all sorts. We were told about how their buoyancy works, but how privileged were we to sit in a submersible, 3-man submersible.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
I've never sat in a submarine before.
No, and they've got a sphere at the front, and I asked Barry how thick it was. So I was sitting in the one seat, and you were outside, and we put our fingers together over, and it was just incredible, 6 inches thick. Yeah. Which obviously does change a little bit.
It shrinks
as it descends.
As deeper you go, which is amazing.
Yeah. So that was awesome. So and then we had a bit more time with Phil.
Yeah.
And then made our merry way home. But it was an absolutely awesome day.
They got these pods as well. So they got these pods for which I've never seen before. We could do one of them pods to do our podcast in.
Quiet rooms.
Yeah. Which are like these they're like telephone booths, weren't they?
I know, but it was just so modern and just incredible. And the staff there also positive and just they know what they're part of, I think.
It reminded me, and I said that many times, I was back in my Virgin days when I used to work for Virgin Direct. Those early days when it was enthusiastic,
fun.
Fun. It was a fun place to be. And you asked a question about what hours do people do, and they work on this. Everybody wants to get the job done. Everybody understands the direction.
They love going to work. They're given breakfast, lunch on site. There's a gym on site, but you just can sense the passion that everybody wants to be there and loves their job.
Yeah, we promise you, we are telling you, it is from the heart because we're under no contract or anything like that to give them any particular positive beef at all, are we? But what we're saying is absolutely the truth.
Yeah, I think there's 80 people that work there at the moment, but obviously that will expand as things develop. But we both left there different people, I think.
And another thing else I took heart in, having young children myself, is that one of the things they're looking at in time will be to work with local schools. Especially for work experience. Get the kids involved in science and stuff, and I think that's really important that we for the future of our country as a whole and science and the ocean, that you do get kids involved in awesome projects like this.
And it's not just project sounds like it's got an end, but this is like a huge mission for the future, and it's just so it's going to be part of our
I can't recommend
industry.
It enough. Get involved, it's not so much get involved, but make sure you're following Deep, follow them on social media.
Look at their website, because it is very, very informative. There's a few YouTube videos on there that just make it very understandable about what they do, and from that they're the real people that work there, and you sense the enthusiasm and the specialist. What's my stomach? Sorry. Do check it out. It's deep.com.
There we go. So that's Deep, and from us a big
huge
big thank you.
Yeah.
So that'd be thank you for that. We should also say big well done to our good friend and long-time dive buddy
Matt Rivet. Yes,
who's just qualified.
Yeah, so he's a PSAI dive master.
So well done, Matt.
Well done, Matt. So we saw Matt quite recently at Stony, didn't we? And he does dive a lot, and he dives a rebreather as well.
Yeah.
So it's really well done. So he's the right person to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's well done to him. In fact, talking about Matt as well, looking for recommendations. Actually, before we get that, I've just got my dry suit back.
Yeah, O3 have we've just opened the box.
It's a little bit patchy, but it had to have a patch on, unfortunately.
Well, its life's been extended.
I've had that dry suit for, blimey, nearly 10 years.
Yeah, well, it's doing okay.
It has, yes, yeah. It's hopefully it's all fixed, and
hopefully you're not going to get
I'm
damp.
not going to get wet. I got rather soaking wet on the.
Well, it's not just damp, wet.
So I was tipping the water out of it.
Yeah. So that was good.
Thanks for O3 for turning that around. Thank you. Always good. Thank you. I need looking for recommendations. Talking to Matt, I've never dived the M2 submarine.
And that's on our UK south coast near Portland.
Yeah,
right?
So the M2 is our first aircraft carrying submarine, and it went down in Lyme Bay in Dorset in January 1932, sadly with all hands.
Right.
It is a war grave, but you are allowed to dive it. Just go around it. And talking to Matt, I was thinking about maybe doing that later in the year.
Yeah, I think it'd be good for you.
I'm going to do a bit of practice, because I haven't done anything deeper than 30 metres for a little while. And I think this is 32 metres. So I think we'll do a couple of dives, probably at Stony on the hydro box, just get a bit of 30 metre plus dives in.
Yeah, and it's great to do it with Matt as well.
So any recommendations who to go do that with? Have you dived it? Let us know. What did you enjoy about it? That'd be really good to get your. I know our good friend Tash has dived it. So Tash, let us know, and that'd be good. So
drop us a DM, or we'll pop some stories up through the week. So respond to that, or I'll pop a question box up as well.
Yeah,
and then you can,
not looking at doing it yet. That probably, hopefully during the summer we'll be before the
more weather windows.
Probably before the school holidays, I think.
Yeah,
that would work in quite well.
Yeah, that's coming up as well. What else have we got to say? Following on, we're going to repeat the previous episode that we had back in 2020 with Phil Short.
Yeah, that's coming out tomorrow.
As is a member of Deep. And then in the weeks to come, we'll be issuing Kirk Crock. He is part of the Deep team as a human performance lead. So we'll re-release his episode in view of our trip to Deep as well.
Yeah, so that comes out with Kirk on the 5th. And then on the 12th, we've got Dr. Deep.
Dr. Deep, Joseph. So we spoke to him prior to Christmas, but he broke or set the record for the longest time underwater in a habitat. I think it was about 10 metres, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So he did that for 100 days.
100 days. Yeah. Actually, 6 metres, I think it was.
Yeah, maybe it was. But he tells us all about...
he lost an inch.
Of height.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and...
This is important for any man.
It is,
Don't go losing inches.
No, but also when we were speaking...
Some of us don't have much.
It's all an issue, isn't it? No, but interestingly, we spoke.
Moving on.
No, I was just going to say, when we spoke to Phil, tests had been done on 2 identical twins. One had gone in an underwater habitat, one hadn't, and he also lost height, didn't he?
Yeah, but he's talking about Scott Kelly who went to space.
Yes, yeah, but it is all the human performance, the factors, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's just incredible. So, anyway, right.
And then on the 26th, we'll bring out the episode of us at Deep.
Yes, so that will be a combination of Phil Short talking about Deep as we move around the facilities and then on the campus, and there'll be a talk from Chris Griffiths as well about the site. So that's really excited about that. And then we will be bringing out YouTube videos of the different sections.
Got to wade through it, literally 60 gigs of video to wade through.
But we'll probably bring out some sort of
stories, shorts and stuff. We've done one yesterday.
Yeah.
And we'll be over the course of February. Don't forget to get your Scuba Dive magazines in. I was going to say over the course of February we'll be bringing this out, and then that'll be time for the Scuba Diver
Go Diving
shows.
Yes, so tickets are available. I did actually look yesterday, so we need to get ours booked. And that is the 2nd and 3rd of March, I believe.
But we'll talk about that in another time.
Okay, I think that's everything we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, it's all good stuff.
Yeah, really exciting stuff. So so do have a look at deep.com, and we hope you enjoy listening to Phil.
As someone said, all the answers are all on that website.
They are.
So go there, have a look.
Yes. So this is episode 170, our previous discussion with Phil Short.
Go find the magic.
Go find his magic. Thanks for listening, and thanks for downloading.
See you soon. Thank you.
Tell us about you, Phil.
Well, I started as a dry caver. So by basically beginnings was dry caving. From dry caving, I found that following cave passages, I'd end up in a place where there was a big hole. So I learned how to use ropes to rappel, and then other places where there was a vertical wall, so I learned to climb. And then eventually, if you follow caves far enough, there's water. So you start by wading, sometimes swimming, sometimes you take inflatable boats and travel in the rivers underground on those, and eventually the water hits the ceiling, and the way on is cave diving. So the only reason really I ever learnt to dive, which started with PADI open water, much like Gemma's about to do, was I approached the cave diving community from my position in the caving community and said, I want to cave dive. They said, well, the best thing you can do is go away and learn to dive, just the basics, clear the mask, buoyancy, swap regulators, and then come back and join the British cave diving group, and they'll teach you not so much to dive, but how to cave underwater. And as they say, the rest is history. That was 30 years ago, and kind of here I am now.
Yeah. So you in the group there with Michael Thomas and Robert, who we had on a few weeks ago.
Robert's my godson.
Oh, right, cool.
Yeah. So it's a very small world.
It is.
Yeah, Mike was my regular cave diving buddy for about 6 years. And so we had numerous adventures all over Europe and North America and definitely the UK. And then when Robert was born, I was friends with Mike and Robert's mum, Sarah. And so they asked me to be the godfather. And funnily enough, he's 20 now. And it literally, over lockdown, was the first opportunity I've had to dive with him. So we've done quite a lot of diving together on rebreather in open water and on side mount in cave over the last few weeks. It's the first chance we've had since he was born, so that's been pretty cool.
Whereabouts are you based in the UK?
Well, I live at the moment in Devizes in Wiltshire, but obviously I don't do any work from there. My position in the industry, if you like, has evolved dramatically over the 30 years. The first 10, I was teaching PADI. I started as a dive master, as with Ian, and then rapidly within 12 months of doing dive master, the centre I worked for asked me to do my IEC, become an instructor. They said, we can't pay for it, but if you do it, we've got a job for you. So I did that. So then I worked for 8 years in Poole and Swanage, alternating season by season between divers down on Swanage Pier and diving leisure as it was then in Poole, slowly building my teaching qualifications till eventually I got up to master instructor, and also building my personal technical diving experience and qualifications, trained by Kevin Gurr, and also building my cave diving experience through the cave diving group, starting to dive more and more adventurous British flooded sections, or sumps as they're known, getting involved in some European cave diving group expeditions. And then slowly the whole thing just started to kind of glue together. Once I got to master instructor, I was faced with a career choice. I could either leave PADI and go down the tech route with Kevin, or go the whole hog and go from master instructor to course director with PADI. And I think my timing was perfect. I chose the tech route just when course director was getting more and more popular. There were more and more people doing it. And tech was just booming and growing. So I chose to go down the tech path with Dave Thompson, Kev Gurr, ended up working for their company. Stayed with Kevin when Dave and Kev went their separate ways company-wise, and basically worked my way up through till I was teaching mostly rebreather, and then opportunity arose to teach rebreather to some scientific institutions, and as a result of that they invited me to come back as basically a team manager for their scientific projects, which grew into dive safety officer, and that's what I do now, have done for like the last 7 years.
All right. So what sort of things, when you say a scientific project, what can you, other things you can tell us about? What sort of things?
Okay, yeah. It's all public domain, because I work as dive safety officer and dive operations manager for universities mainly, but also for the United States National Park Service, for Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, WOI, the institute in Boston, Massachusetts, that found Titanic, found the black smokers, found the white smokers, found the missing hydrogen bomb that the Americans carelessly lost. So
I heard about that, yeah.
Yeah, I work as the supervisor on basically almost exclusively archaeological projects. So in the last 7 years, I've worked a number of years on the Antikythera mechanism shipwreck as supervisor, on the Mentor shipwreck, which was Lord Elgin's ship carrying the Parthenon marbles from the Acropolis of Athens back to the British Museum and sunk. One of our most rewarding jobs, we worked on a US B-17 bomber off of the island of Vis in Croatia, to recover the pilot, and so he could be taken back and buried by his family for closure, which was a really good project, because we had to effectively disassemble the wreck, sift through all the remains in the seabed, find the crew remains, then put the wreck back together, and basically come away from that project.
Was he the only one left?
There were 3 missing. So when the plane ditched, 3 didn't make it. There's eyewitness reports from those that did make it that at least 1 was thrown clear of the wreckage on impact. So we were looking for 2. We found extensive osseous or bone remains, but what happens then is they are shipped out to the DPAA's laboratories in Hawaii, and they do DNA testing on the bone remains. And what happened was all the bone remain we found were 1 person, Lieutenant Eugene B. Ford, who was the pilot. So he went back to his family. He had a full Arlington military ceremony, and then was buried by his family in his home cemetery. So it's what they consider as closure. Archaeology, you dig down, excavate down centimetre by centimetre. Once you're a given distance beneath the last find, you're in what's called sterile ground, and then you close the site. So we acquired sterile ground of the entire area with no more finds. So they said, well, obviously the 2 missing were thrown clear of the wreck either on impact or during sinking, and we got lucky with finding the pilot. But we found his wedding ring, his flight wings, most of his heated suit, his earphones.
It's good that the family got them back.
Exactly. That's the DPAA, which is the Defence POW MIA accounting agency. They've got in excess of 5,000 sites worldwide, from wars going back to the First World War right through to Vietnam, Korea, and their job is to do exactly that, leave no man behind. So whether it be in the jungles, in the mountains, in the Arctic, or underwater, their task is to slowly work down this list of aircraft crash sites where people didn't come home. We did one in 2017. That was the B-24 Witchcraft. Beg your pardon, that's the one we flew in. B-24 Tulsa American. And then we were due back this year, but due to COVID, it's likely now to be next year. A similar job on a B-17, which is a bit deeper. So that's pretty rewarding work.
Yeah.
And then
How late is that?
70. The Tulsa American was 40, and the B-17 is at 70. The B-17 doesn't even have a name. It was so new. It was delivered to the aircrew to Italy, flown on its first mission, flak damaged and ditched in the sea on the way back. So the crew hadn't even had time to give her a name and paint some nose art on her.
Oh, okay.
First mission.
Yeah, it must be really great. Obviously, you're learning all the history behind it as well as obviously doing the job of recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. I find, as well as being supervisor and trainer for the team, and then a commercial working diver on the project, all the heavy work is done by us rather than the scientists. I got really interested in the archaeological side of things as well, both with Antikythera was 200 BC. So we recovered human remains from that, including an intact skull, and we're able to extract DNA from it. This is like 2,200 years old. So I started training with NAS, did all my NAS qualifications, and slowly started working up through the projects and courses, gaining the NAS credits. So basically, mainly I could supervise from a viewpoint of understanding what they were trying to achieve.
Yeah, incredible.
Wow, that is.
You just start with cave diving and then it just leads to, an amazing.
Yeah, but the cave diving has always remained a passion. That's basically, if I get a day off, you'll find me in a hole in the ground, not in the sea. But I tend to work in the sea a lot for my job.
Yeah. So what have you been doing sort of through lockdown? Have you had projects to work on outside of obviously not getting in the water?
Well, basically what I've done is I've basically got a really good head start on writing the risk assessments and project plans for our next series of projects. So normally they're done leading up to and then even during a project, whereas here I've been able to get a lot of risk assessment and project plans written out ready for the next 3 in advance. Building and testing equipment we need for those jobs. So when you excavate on these aircraft, you use what's called a water dredge, which is a more controlled version of an airlift powered by water jet, not by air bubbles. So we've been designing and building one specifically for this next job because it's deep. So we've been able to do that. On a personal level, I've really, the first 2 months of lockdown where I simply couldn't get in the water at all, I really threw myself into my drones because I've got a commercial drone license. Do that for the projects to get aerial footage of the work sites, etc. So I renewed that commercial license, did some specialty training and got hundreds of flight hours to sort of grow my skill set, which was fun. It's something different. Learned photogrammetry, which was great fun. Wasn't able to get underwater footage, so was using the drone footage to then make 3D models. I live on the Kennet and Avon Canal, so I was making 3D models of the Cane Hill locks, which was good. So new skills that add to my company, add to the various bits and bobs we do for the projects through the institutions. And then finally was able to slowly start getting back in the water. I was I'm one of the members of the British Diving Safety Group, so I was involved in all the meetings that slowly work towards approval for people to go back to diving. And I think we announced the acceptable to go back to shore diving within family groups on a Wednesday, and at 4 a.m. the next morning I drove to Chesil Beach and did a really straightforward shore dive on the United States tank landing craft in a pair of doubles, not even a rebreather, just on my own, and it was absolutely fabulous just to be back in the water. And since then I've managed to get wet a couple of times a week in some caves, in the sea, in the quarries, to get hours back on the rebreather and get rebreather current ready for when the projects start again. So kept sane. And to be honest, after the last 10 years have been pretty hectic with a massive amount of dive hours and numbers of dives. So I actually feel pretty well rested after the 3 months. I think it did me some good.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have benefited from the lockdown in different ways that they never thought possible.
Yeah.
So what sort of drone you got?
I've got a Phantom 4 V2, the DJI one. I started with a Phantom 3 and upgraded to a Phantom 4, mainly because it's a bit more stable. The communication is more stable because it's wired from the viewing screen to the handset, whereas the 3 was Wi-Fi, so some connectivity issues. But most importantly, the 4's got a much higher quality camera. So I've still got the 3, so when I'm doing jobs where there's a reasonable chance I might have an incident, especially working from boats, I tend to take the 3, but they're all insured.
Not cheap, are they?
The better the camera, the more expensive they are. So I also do some work alongside another drone pilot, and he has an Inspire, which is the big drone, and you fly it together. So one of you flies the bird and the other one actually controls the camera. So there's 2 sets of remote. So when I work with him, I fly the aircraft and he controls the camera and shoots, which is quite nice. But that's a completely different budgetary bracket.
So with your scuba diving, did you get inspired by anybody to start it, or was it just literally because you were a caver that thought you had to add that on?
The inspiration for cave diving came. I was working at the time. I lived in Surrey. I was working at a camping and outdoor shop in Guildford, and nearby was Guildford University. I wasn't at the university; it was just nearby, so I was able to use their climbing wall in the evening. So I'd cycle into work in the climbing and camping shop, cycle over to the climbing wall, climb in the evenings, and then basically cycle home, and then go out climbing and caving and other sorts of adventuring at the weekends. And at the climbing wall one day, there was a little note on the notice board saying that there was a talk by a guy called Martin Farr about cave diving. And I was like, right, we'll go and see that. So me and my climbing buddy went to see this talk, and at the end of the talk, Martin was selling his book, which was the first edition of the Darkness Beck. So the talk was like amazing, and then we bought the book and went home and read it end to end, and then started going to a lot of the caves that were mentioned in the book, but at that point not diving. And it was, I think, one of my real sort of bucket list proudest parts of my career, as it were, is first edition was definitely a massive part of inspiring me to be a cave diver, and then I was actually in the last edition that was released last year for one of my projects. So it was like full circle. It was like that book got me going, and I ended up in that book in its third edition by sort of 2019. So that was kind of a bit of a journey and a bit of a story. So that was,
that's really something to shout out about.
Yeah, he's a great guy though. He's a personal friend rather than just someone who I know because he's famous. He's a really good guy, extremely driven explorer, and has just basically sort of led the way for a lot of us.
Yeah, and it seems quite a tight-knit community, the diving world.
It depends. The more specialist you get, the tighter it gets. So diving is quite a tight-knit community. Tech diving is tighter. If you then go sideways from tech diving into tech cave diving, it's even tighter. And if you then get into the really tiny world of British sump dive, which is basically driven by the British Cave Diving Group, then it's really, there's literally a handful of proponents that are actually actively doing it over the years. So yeah, everyone tends to know everyone. And generally, there's always exceptions to the rule. Generally, it's the camaraderie is excellent, the friendship and the teamness. If you need to go on a project and you need 20 regulators, there's a good chance after 2 or 3 phone calls they can be pulled together from different people that will loan them for the project, or manufacturers will say, yeah, we'll loan you when you bring them back, send them back whatever condition they're in. So it's quite a nice community.
It's really good for the manufacturers as well, because then they can they're continually testing their equipment.
Yeah, well, we do have a bit of a reputation, British cave divers, or what you could call Northern European cave divers. And the best way to separate technical cave diving, which you'd find in the Yucatan of Mexico, Florida, central France, like the Midi-Pyrenees, some of which is absolutely, unbelievable distances and depths, way in excess of what a British sump dive would do, but it is diving. So you're technical diving in a flooded underwater environment. What sump diving is, what the British Cave Diving Group and equivalent specialise in, is caving underwater. So the idea is lots of dry caving. The dive is an obstacle. Diving equipment as necessary is used to pass that obstacle. And that may well be rebreather, DPV, dry suit, heated suit systems. But it could be as simple as a couple of 3-litre cylinders tucked under the armpit in a wetsuit and a pair of rubber Wellingtons. But the objective with Eva is to get through that flooded section, drop that gear and go caving again. So it's a means of passing obstacles rather than a means to an end.
So with your caving, have you travelled all around the world? Is it taken you quite extensively to different places?
Very, very much so. I mean, basically, I've been lucky enough to explore, so actually to lay line and go to places where no human being has been before, in Spain, in France, in Russia, in the UK, on the Balearic Islands, in the US, and in Mexico. And then cave dive on already laid line in numerous other countries. But the drive, why a purist cave diver, why we do it, is for that chance to be able to, explore in the truest sense of the word. No aircraft, no satellite, no camera can go there before you.
No.
When you get to the end of the last laid line, tie on your own line and swim ahead into the darkness. That it's exploration like it was for Shackleton, Scott, Amundsen, Hillary, pre-technology. It's true exploration. So it's a privilege and a drive. It's definitely why we do it.
Yeah, it must be exciting to go to these places where no one's actually ever been to before. And it's all, you're breaking new ground. Must be really exciting.
Very exciting, but it's also it's humbling and a big privilege. And one of my exploratory mentors, who I was lucky enough to go on expedition with in 2013 for 3 months, Bill Stone, he told me right at the beginning when I first met him, if you go and dive in a cave or anywhere else and you come back and say, I dived it, here's a photo, that is not exploration. To call it exploration, you have to go, find it, document it, survey it, and bring back the data. So in cave exploration, that will be the highest grade map you're capable of producing, so that the map can be added to the already existing map of the dry cave, overlaid on the surface map of the region, and you start to get an understanding for the hydrogeology of the region, where the water's going, where it's likely to come out. Because this can be useful for communities, for basically fresh water availability, for agriculture, or just for drinking and washing. You're also bringing back data of any life forms or water samples and sediment samples. In some cases, cave archaeology, skeletal remains from burial sites when water levels were different from entrance areas of caves. So you really are participating in speleology, whether it's a map, a survey, a sample, biological, geographical, geographical, you're bringing back data. And that's really, I think, for me, is where you get the defining point between a highly adventurous caving or diving trip and a genuine expedition. A genuine expedition achieving genuine exploration is going for a scientific purpose. It will bring back data, what it found, that can go into the annals of such data held within institutions like the Royal Geographic Society, the Explorers Club, etc. Because when the next generation come, right, I want to continue that exploration, where do I start? They can go to these institutions, read up on what's been done, and have enough information to go further, rather than just a picture saying, we went here, we got deeper than the last person. What did you find? What direction does it go in? What's the compass bear? What's the nature of the rock? What's the size of the passage? So the next team can plan. And that's how we plan our expeditions. We base it on the research of the last people to go there, and build up our project plan from there.
And I suppose some of these caves, they probably have the research and the work that was carried out might have been years ago, when it was all down with handwritten notes and drawings and things like that. Now we've got how modern technology is coming more in use. Christina Sonato, who we've had on a couple of times, was telling us about the Nemo system that they use, how that integrates with Google Earth, and you can see, like, for building, when they're looking at the building regulations now, you can say, right, that's right on top of a cave, and that's not a good idea. And that's brilliant, that modern technology you can use, and that's going to help you guys, do your job.
Yeah, absolutely. Back in the day, you'd survey with a tape measure, a pencil and a notepad, and now in a dry cave we use a laser. So you just have one guy at the last point, next guy goes as far ahead as he can go and still be in line of sight. You just bounce the laser off his plaque, and basically it automatically records the data, and you can then download that to a pad while you're underground. Effectively, the survey is being drawn while you're exploring. So, and the sky's the limit. If you look at what Stone's been doing with three-dimensional autonomous mapping with things like sunfish in the caves of Namibia, this is basically what looks, if you see it, looks like a small DPV, but it doesn't take a diver. It has no umbilical. It's an AUV, an autonomous underwater vehicle. And it's so clever. You drop it in the cave, and it's basically then able to just swim into the cave, three-dimensionally mapping everything that it sees. And it's so clever, it can then say, right, time to come home because I'm reaching reserve on battery. And it turns around and follows its own map home out of Google it. It's called Sunfish. The test dives were done in Peacock Springs in North Florida, monitored by cave divers just in case.
Surely you don't want too much of that going on, though, do you?
Well, yes, because if you look, the legend that wrote most of the rules we follow for cave diving was Sheck Exley, cave diver number 1. And he sadly passed trying to explore the far reaches of a very, very deep sinkhole cave in Mexico. And what Bill was able to do with an earlier iteration of Sunfish was go back and complete that job autonomously in sub 300 meters of depth. So we're getting to the point where with things like Hranice Abyss in Czech Republic, explored by Krzysztof Staranowski, and other sites like this, we're getting to the point where we're beyond human capability, similar to the deepest parts on the ocean. Free swimming diver at this time can't go there. You can't detect that human, but it doesn't mean you can't still explore. And the goal of what Bill is creating with this sun is it's a test bed. Caves are a test bed. Building a nuclear-powered autonomous vehicle to swim around in the ocean under the ice cap on Europa, Jupiter's moon, to look for microbial life. So the link between what cave explorers are doing,
But why not our own planet?
Well, it's being done as well. So, I mean, the daft thing is, if you look at the technology to keep out the pressure of 7 miles of water depth versus the technology to keep out it's easier to make it survive in space than it is to make something that can survive at 7 miles depth in the Mariana Trench.
Crazy, isn't it?
All this.
Yeah, well, it's true. Yeah,
I won't get.
When we're talking to like the guys at the Galapagos, and they talk about the whale sharks and how they don't know where they go, and you think, and that's some of that is because of the whale shark, but also because the oceans are just not that explored. And you think, wow, you could use something like that and find out more about where the whale sharks are going, explore more of the ocean. But then part of me also thinks, don't we still want to have places on Earth where we don't know?
Yeah, absolutely.
We've still got these mysteries.
Yeah, it'd be brilliant. Like Conan Doyle's Lost World. Imagine some sort of isolated peak in the middle of the jungle of the Amazon that nobody's been to. We've still got dinosaurs on top of it. Something like that. It's a schoolboy dream. I mean, but you've just summed up why we do this. Why does a normal guy decide I'm going to spend my life going down underwater, going in a cave, going up a mountain? Because you want to know what's around that next corner. It's the unknown. So for some people in the general public, the general populace, the unknown equals fear. For others, the unknown equals excitement. For cave explorers, for ocean explorers, for mountain climbers, these are people that are excited by it. What is it? Where is it? Can I go and have a look at it?
And it's history making.
That's exciting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you've changed things though, because we've had various guests. And I'm not going to name names, but we've had various guests who are either wreck divers or cave divers, and they never seem to bridge the two. They either go down one route or the other. You seem as though you get excited by the both. Whether it's on and diving onto a B, that's where I'd be. I'd be on the B-17. That interests me a lot. I've been, got a lot of, I get right excited about history, especially World War II stuff. I find it totally fascinating. But you're also getting interested into the wreck side, the caves dive and stuff. So it's good that you're bridging the two.
Yeah, it was an accident, really. I mean, like I say, I was a caver, and basically linked into caving was climbing and mountain walking, because a lot of the caves are on top of a mountain, and a lot of caves have vertical sections up or down. So those three sports kind of linked together, and that was me. And then when the British Cave Diving Group said, no problem, but we need you to go and do a basic diving course before we can start. And back then there wasn't much internet. So I went to Smith's and I bought a copy of Diver magazine, and I went to the classifieds back and went, right, Dorset is the nearest to me. I lived in Surrey, found a dive centre, rung them up, said, I'd like to learn to dive. They said, we can do that. We've got another guy interested. So we can run a course. And it was February 1990. So we went down, we did the pool sessions. The sea was too rough, so we drove up to Stony Cove for the 4 open water dives, and I ended up qualified. And I was like, but I really like that too. That was fun. And so then they literally both grew together. So the passion in the wrecks and the sea and the marine life, and the passion in the caves and the exploration, they grew sort of hand in hand, and they complemented each other, because as I learned to trimix in the open water, I was then able to use the trimix skills in cave, etc., etc. So it worked well.
Yeah. So for kind of someone like me, a non-diver, what advice would you give to someone just maybe considering stepping into the scuba world?
Well, I tend to give a piece of advice that was given to me by my mentor. My first instructor was a guy who's not teaching or diving anymore. It's a guy called Steve Axtell, and he was an absolute legend. If you talk around the PADI community with instructors that were trained or course stoic trained from the sort of the 90s and the early 2000s, he was one of the iconic PADI educators, absolutely brilliant. And when I started during my open water course, which you're currently doing, he said to me, the secret is on every dive, practice one skill and choose the ones you don't like and you're no good at, because then they'll become easy. And when they're easy, start practicing another one that you don't like and you're not good at. And if you make the effort at some point during every dive to stop looking at the fish, stop looking at the wreck, and sacrifice to the gods of diving improvement 5 minutes of each dive to practice a skill, you will get better. And 7,000 dives later, I've stuck to his advice, and that is how I've improved, is by continually practicing. So that I really couldn't beat that advice that he gave to me.
It's good advice.
Yeah, and I just share it and pass it on because I'm only able to teach people because he taught me. So, it seems full circle to pass his great advice on to the people that I'm now.
Yeah, no, that's good. And do you still teach, or is it not something you do anymore?
Yeah, I teach, but really it would be wrong to say I teach what I want to teach. I teach the really kind of high-level specialist stuff. So the last 4 years, I've done a 5 or 6 week period each year in the mines of Scandinavia, teaching the advanced levels. So trimix rebreather in mine, DPV in mine, cartography and mapping for mine diving. The same thing, I do a 6 to 8 week period per year in France, doing the same for cave. So advanced cave, like mapping, DPV use, multi-stage, diving beyond flooded sections and caving beyond. And then in the ocean, the higher levels, so the highest level of rebreather, the hypoxic trimix. I've not taught open circuit for many years. It's been exclusively rebreather for certainly the last 5, realistically the last 10. And now with teaching mostly like 90% in mine or cave, with the occasional ocean-based course, but at the higher. And the main reason for that is, as an instructor trainer, I've trained a lot of the UK instructors, certainly those that work within my agency, INSD UK. So it's their turn. It's like, I'm teaching the high levels. They teach people up to a certain point. People say, well, what do I do next? I want to do this. Can you teach it? And they go, well, no, but the guy who taught me can do that. And slowly this moves. Yeah. So one year I might be able to teach normoxic trimix rebreather to a guy, but slowly his instructor, I move him up the ladder as he gets experienced and gets the hours and gets the knowledge. And basically there's no need for me to teach the beginners. I've taught people to do that. And it's their turn. Diversity is good. So
Yeah.
Today's episode is sponsored by Narked at 90. So let's find out a bit more about them. Narked at 90, their tagline has been beyond technical, which describes them pretty well. John Routley and Brent Hudson launched the company over 20 years ago. They are both technical divers who have logged thousands of mixed gas dives between them over a 30-year period. Using their engineering know-how and diving expertise, have developed bespoke, personal, commercial and military diving equipment and products of a universally recognised, unparalleled calibre.
Their ability to be adaptive and versatile with their developments led them to support the NHS during COVID, using their superior knowledge of breathing and oxygen monitoring systems to help develop emergency ventilators. They also design and supply the sneaky stuff used by defence-based development groups throughout the Western world, although they can't tell us much about that. If you're thinking of moving across to tech diving or completely new to diving, Narked at 90 can advise and guide on the best equipment and setup for your personal or commercial requirements. Narked at 90 have unparalleled experience of shearwater dive computers and are the longest serving and sole and UK European service centre for those. They are happy to offer technical support, servicing, repairs and upgrades to all shearwater computers, past and present. Narked at 90 stock shearwater computers, but are also stockers and technical support centre for many other manufacturers, including Divesoft, JJCCR, Hollis, Revo and KISS rebreathers.
Based centrally in the UK, Narked at 90 also offer full rebreather head servicing for selected manufacturers.
Bespoke cable assemblies.
Advice on specific fitting requirements.
Suggestions and guidance for home builds.
Computer laser cutting and engraving.
Pressure testing to simulate 400-metre dives.
So, Narked at 90, a reputation built on supporting both manufacturers and divers worldwide.
Go to narkedat90.com and make sure you are following their social media to keep up to date with their latest news and offers.
Narked at 90, large enough to cope, small enough to care.
So what rebreather do you use?
At the moment, I've tried to run a procedure over my career, and realistically, it's been 15 years where I've been more or less exclusively on rebreathers. But in that 15 years, I've tried to be fairly strict with a no more than 2 rebreather policy, because I don't feel, and this is very much because I know you're recording this and you use it, very much a personal thing for me. I don't feel I can remain knowledgeable and current to do my very best job at teaching 5, 6, 7 rebreathers, because they're all unique. So I've tried to stay within 2 systems. And when I say systems, there are, for example, several rebreathers which consist of breathing bags, breathing hoses and a mouthpiece. That's all the same, more or less. What changes is the control system. So it's a bit like saying, do you use a Mac? Do you use a PC? It's hard to be really good at using both. So I've tried to always limit myself to 2 control systems. And obviously the control system that has, over the last 5 years, for want of a better phrase, taken over the rebreather world is Shearwater. So my main platform at the moment, which was driven by demand, all the course inquiries I get at those higher levels, and all my scientific project teams are using JJ. So certainly in the last 2 years, I've pretty much been exclusively on the JJ.
Right, okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and like you say, you can't, be a master of everything, can you? You've just got to concentrate.
I'm a cave diver. I drag my knuckles along the floor, and I haven't got a big enough brain to learn 2 things at once.
Have you seen an increase in women coming into your kind of level of diving in the last 10 years? Or what's your view on it?
An increase, yes, but not a big enough increase, because basically in technical cave diving, so back to what we were talking about earlier, where there's a difference between technical diving in a cave where you are predominantly always underwater, but that time underwater might be 2-3 kilometers of distance, it might be 100 meters of depth, it might be 4 or 5 hours of time, but you are underwater the whole, versus a dry caving trip where you have to take equipment a very long distance dry to get it to where you can dive. In the example of the J2 project, 12 kilometers horizontally, over 1 kilometer vertically on rope, carrying all the gear over many, many months. So there is, in the technical diving community, there is absolutely no division. Some of the best technical diving cave divers that I've dived with are women, as equally some are men. There's no divide whatsoever. You look at the likes of Christina, of Jill, these people are, world class, leading the way, not following. It's irrelevant, and when there tends to be a greater proportion of male cave divers. Now, why that is, I don't know. The physical strength side is necessary. So to carry gear 12 kilometers, crawling on your face, abseiling down ropes, it requires a certain degree of stamina, fitness, and insanity. Fact. But there are extremely gifted female dry cave practitioners that are doing that. A US girl called Gilly Ellor was on the 2013 J2 project as a support caver, and she's gone on to learn rebreather and is now using that to do similar projects in her own right. So I don't really see a division, to be honest. Much like in athletics, the divide between the male times and female times has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. I think it's basically exactly the same. So there has been a rise, to answer your question, but I personally don't think it's a big enough rise. There should be far more women out there getting involved in doing this. Whether that's because they don't want to, or whether it's not because they're not given opportunities, I don't know. As a community, we can certainly do something about by taking away the stigma. No, it's not elitist. It's available for anyone who wants to put the effort in.
Yeah. Well, having spoken to Jill and Christina, it's just, inspiring how they've kind of moved right through and progressed. Yeah. And they're still progressing as well, aren't they? There's just kind of it's limitless really where they go.
So have you seen on some of these dives that you've done? And I'm thinking about some of the remote dive you've done, carried out, like with the B-17, maybe some of the caves, but probably the wreck one. Are you seeing more evidence of man? So plastic waste and litter and things like. Are you seeing evidence of that creeping into some of these remote places?
Absolutely, yeah, everywhere. The only exception is the only place we see pristine nature as it was before we ruined it is deep in these remote caves. So like the J2 cave as an example, firstly the entrance to the cave is on top of the mountain in secondary rainforest. The mountain is in a very remote part of southern Mexico on the Guatemala border, so the only thing around the base of the mountain is peasant ranches. So you're like a day by dirt track before you even get to the ranch. You're then a day by foot and donkey to get to the top of the mountain where base camp is. And then you're then 4 days from the entrance of the cave to the dive site underground. When you get to a place like that, there are no footprints, there is no dirt, there's no plastic, there's nothing. It is literally unspoilt by man. In the ocean, I've been to some very remote places. Truck Lagoon, very lucky to go there. Other places in the Pacific, and it's everywhere, which I suppose is inevitable because the sea moves. And when you look at articles and footage from scientific-based institutions, not like trash magazines or trash TV, we've got floating oceans of plastic just out in the middle of the Pacific. These areas like a kilometre across of floating plastic trash just in the middle of the ocean. So it is everywhere. We can't erase that it's happened and it's there. What we need to do is move forward and deal with it. And, you can't pretend it doesn't exist. It does. We've just got to collectively as a species stop and then clean up the mess we've already made.
It's quite a big responsibility when you think about it, that when you go to these places that you're talking about, J2, and you go to these extreme places where it takes you days just to get to the dive site, that when you leave there, you're thinking, right, have we got everything? How you take it's quite a big responsibility to make sure you've got everything with you that you took there. It is right down to wrappers and food things.
Everything, absolutely everything is brought out, and that's the last phase. I mean, J2 was 3 months long. I personally spent 45 days underground. There were 50 plus people from 15 countries involved in the project through the 3 months.
Big operation.
If you like, the glory bit was basically 9 days long, and it was smack in the middle. The first month was setting it up. The last month was bringing everything out. The only thing that was left in the cave, pending future returns to continue exploration, was the lead weights. They were left by the waterside for any other future team that wants to go and continue the diving with a.
Did not leave a note.
Sorry,
did you not leave a note? We were here first.
No.
With a photo going
back to data. We've got the data. We've got video. We've got stills. We've got a grade 5C cartographic map of where we went to, but we didn't carry the lead out. Other than that, wrappers, food waste, everything's brought out of the cave, which is a lot of work. But you do have that. Some of the caves. This particular cave is a river cave, so in the wet season it floods and then clears itself through. But some of the caves that have no water flow ever, places like a very famous long distance, beautiful cave in the Americas called Lechuguilla, they're hermetically sealed. There's an airlock to get in, and then you've got tens of kilometres to get to the far reaches of the cave. And in those circumstances, even the human waste is brought out. Peas in bottles, solid waste is in bags, and all that's brought out as well to stop any bacterial. Somewhere like J2, it floods in the winter. So basically, if you pee in the winter when the whole cave floods, it's out to what do we exit. But everything.
We take a lot of planning. Gemma's now seeing all this because, we went diving at the weekend and she saw all the gear that I have. You need the truck, you put all this gear in, the boxes, and that's just for a day. That's just for a couple swims, and I can't imagine the amount of gear that you need to go away for 3 months somewhere remote, the food and everything for 50 people.
Well, we literally on J2 we spent like I said 3 months in the field, 45 days of which for me personally were underground. 50 plus people, And of that time, me and one other diver were able to pass the terminal flooded section and find New Cay once. So that you basically, what you went for was one day of those 3 months. And it's interesting. Welcome to the sport, Gemma, because it's one of the worst sports I've ever come across for return. So there's this lovely joke where one member of a partnership says, "Oh, I'm going off diving. I'll see you this evening." And the other member of the partnership goes, "Okay, have a nice day." And you go off, and 9 hours later you come back and they say, "What did you do?" I said, "Well, I did like a 30-minute dive on a wreck in the morning, and I did a 35-minute dive on the reef in the afternoon." "Well, why were you gone 9 hours?" Well, that's not right. And it does. And if you get more technical, it gets worse, because for 20 minutes on a 60-meter wreck on open circuit, you'll end up spending 40 minutes decompressing. So a 60-minute dive is 40 minutes of doing nothing for 20 minutes of doing something. And to get there is 3 hours on a boat. To get back is 3 hours on a boat, plus all the preparation, cylinder filling, analysing, labelling, blah, blah, blah. So the return is awful, but we love it, and that's why we
Exactly, yeah. And are you still keeping the logbook?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm on volume 28, all paper logbooks. It's more of a journal now, so I've got sketches, hand-drawn maps, even some little watercolours of things that I've seen. I photocopy more detailed maps from sources and stick those into the books folded, but they all sit on a bookshelf, all 28 volumes.
That's amazing.
I also got mine. I'm not up to 28 though. I think I'm up to about 5, I think.
Well, I was up to 5 at one point, but I've logged every single dive since that first open water paddy dive in Stony Cove.
That's good to hear though, because we've had people on who stopped and then regretted it, because years have gone on and they haven't kept those records, and they'd like to go back to that time. And, I think that's nice.
A lot of colleagues like that, and I think if I'd ever have stopped, and there were times like in my first 8 years when I was teaching on Swanage Pier, I might do 8 dives a day, but 6 of them would be 20-minute Swanage Pier dives for a Discover Scuba Diver. So they're real dives, they're in the sea, they're 20 minutes long. But I started logging those as just single lines. And I think if I'd given up then, because I was like, oh really, do I need to log this? It's just another Swanage Pier dive. If I'd given up then, I probably would never have restarted. So I'm really pleased that people joke with me, some people have OCD. My friends tell me I have CDO because OCD wasn't in alphabetical order. It's unfortunately, it's not far from the truth. So, logging.
I've not heard of that. I like that.
CDO, logging works for me. I just like, it's part of my day. I finish my dive, I sit down, depending on what's going on, I have a cup of tea or a beer, and I get the logbook out and the pen.
I think Gemma's got that.
What, CDO?
CDO.
Mine will probably be on a spreadsheet. I like spreadsheets.
So I've got a spreadsheet for it, or there's a list for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for our listeners, that's good advice as well. It's just never give up. Yeah, logging your dives, definitely. So yeah, and I'll start mine soon.
Yeah, we better do the questions, Gemma.
Yes, yeah. So our first question is, what dive location is on your wish list, bucket list, and why?
Antarctica. I don't want to go down there for like a couple of days as part of a cruise in Southern America. Go down several months, dive it properly under the ice. And the reason is that the Antarctic environment, despite cold, is just created because of its stability. These gigantic versions of marine life that we commonly see when we dive off the south coast here. And from a reading point of view, probably one of the biggest sections of my own library is early Antarctic and Arctic exploration, the likes of Scott and Amundsen and Shackleton. So to visit the place, both for diving and to see the place itself, is probably the highest thing on my bucket list. At 51 now, and with the financial constraints of that, the chances are getting slimmer, but one day maybe.
You need to talk to Paul Rose.
Paul is a very good friend of mine. I trained him in rebreather and I taught him to cave dive. I worked with him on the Ocean series. I was one of the safety divers and his trainer, and Tuni Martu's trainer on the Ocean series for the underwater speleoforms episode for the filmed on the Balearic. So Paul's a very good friend. Paul was also my primary sponsor for fellowship of the Royal Geographic Society. So he's a really good friend, great guy, absolutely great guy.
Yeah,
and one of the best ambassadors for our sport. He's just so enthusiastic. It's amazing. Yeah.
And that was fascinating talking to him. And he's telling us about the polar bear incident when he was in the tent, and but you feel the enthusiasm and the motivation, and he's just like dying to tell you about scuba diving and exploring, you know, and that's brilliant, you know. And that's one of the great things about us doing this podcast is that it's allowed us to talk to some really people like you who did some fascinating stuff who we wouldn't have normally got to speak, you know, and it is brilliant. And every day we like pinch ourselves, like, wow, you know, that was great. You know, we spoke to someone else on Monday, here was another one, and you walk away thinking, wow, these, you know, stuff that these people are doing, brilliant, you know.
Yeah, it is.
More credit to you guys, as well as the personal achievement of that for yourself. You've shared it with the community, and I think that's been one of the positives to take out of COVID lockdown is, I mean, personally, I've done 28 webinars for different groups, all voluntary, because it's like, well, yeah, let's basically give people a reason to stay sane and look forward to getting back to it. And it's down to the organisers, you guys with the Big Scuba podcast, Chantel with the Diver Medic and her series of podcasts, lots of more regional ones with little local groups that have set things up. And it's basically, it's a phenomenal thing that you guys have done, all of you that have set up events like this.
Well, thank you very much. It's very kind to say so. But we just really enjoy it, and Gemma's going to be starting her journey.
Yeah, I'm very lucky to have spoken to all these people, and it's kind of really, you know, inspired me so much more as well. And you just think, oh, I want to do it. Yeah. Anyway, right. So another question is, what is your favourite marine animal and why?
So I think it's changed over the years, but I think now, because of one experience I had in freshwater spring in Florida, a place called Fanning Spring, I was doing my freediver course, and I did it with a couple of friends. And one of the other students on the freediving course was Jill Heinrich. So it was basically Gemma Smith, Jill Heinrich and myself. And we went on the freediving course. And the very first day we went to do the basic skills after the dry training and the breathing techniques training. And we went to Fanning Springs because it's not very deep. It's about 10 foot deep at the deepest point. Most of it's about 6 feet. And we got in the water, and we were in the water for about 4 hours. And at the end of the day, the instructors were like, well, that was a brilliant day, but a little bit disappointing, because we didn't manage to achieve almost any of the skills. And the reason for that is, when I first got in the water, I was just floating on the surface and I felt something like really grab my leg. So I looked down, and there's basically a manatee, and he's got both of his front flippers wrapped around my right leg, giving me a hug. And it was in an open spring. It wasn't in a place where they are basically held in by fenced areas or anything like that. It wasn't in a place where they naturally hang out and the tourist trips go to because they're trying to stay in warm water. It was way off the beaten track, up one of the rivers in a small, not very frequently visited spring. So that manatee had come into that spring because it wanted, it stayed because it wanted. And when we were trying to do our dynamic apnea, swimming along, breath hold, the manatee was swimming with us, and it literally stayed with us the whole time. And I've got video up on my Facebook page and what have you of this manatee just nuzzling, pushing his nose up against my nose through my mask, just nuzzling like this, and it's close-up GoPro footage. And this creature was just, I mean, it was happy to be with us. It was communicating with us in some way totally ununderstandable to me. Prior to that experience, I would have said rays, all types of rays, and I still love rays. But that 4 hours free diving with that manatee made them a particularly magical species to me.
Yeah.
You know, they're just quite unique. So
and they're very strange looking, aren't they? It's just prehistoric. Yeah. Okay, to you, Ian.
Okay, so can you give us 3 people who you would choose to either, if they can't dive, and maybe we can say rock climb, you know, as you like to dry rock climb as well. Doesn't matter too much. So can you give us 3 people you choose to take either rock climb and dive or snorkeling if they can't do either? Yeah. From either history or whenever.
Okay, so the first one would be Jules Verne.
Yep.
Yeah, French author from the 1800s, wrote 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Journey to the Centre of the Earth, etc., etc. And really, for me, he's the grandfather of steampunk, because he invented the Nautilus submarine for Captain Nemo before submarines even existed. And he invented it based on natural history drawings of the inside of a Nautilus seashell with its separate air compartments to enable it to be neutral and rise and fall. And he went, right, let's make one of those that men can go in. So he effectively invented the submarine before it existed in a manner where, although what he was writing was fiction, if you look at it now, it is how submarines work. So he was like ahead of his time. And he did Journey to the Center of the Earth, which is caving. He did Around the World in a Balloon, which is flying. He did 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which is a form of diving. And he had diving dress. His crew lived on everything only from the ocean, harvesting but responsibly, etc., etc. So if you combine the storytelling, the steampunk costumes and machines and means of transportation, and the environment. So I would just love to have met him, and so to go for a dive with him on a cave trip and sit. Funnily enough, we had a copy of Journey to the Center of the Earth with us, paperback copy in a plastic bag in J2.
Did you?
We used to read it to each other at bedtime in the camps, underground camps, which was a bit of fun. So
I like that.
That would be my first one, Jules Verne. Second one would most definitely, I think, be Shackleton, because of the classic historic Victorian explorers. I admire him most. I don't tend to use the hero word. I tend to have people in history I admire for what they did and the way they did it. And what I admire most about him was his devotion to his men, his leadership. And that was the most important thing. If we do something and something goes wrong, we basically do everything in our power to bring everyone home alive. And so I've read a lot of his stuff. His leadership would be one of those things. So yeah, that was it. How many am I meant to have? 3, was it? Three. So I've got one more. So I suppose I should try and think of someone who's not dead, because so far I've thought from history. So I think it would have to be Attenborough. And obviously at his current age in life, it would have to be not too crazy, not too deep or whatever else like that. But he is the biggest ambassador of all our generations. So whether it's like a 15-year-old doing their junior open water, or a 50-year-old like me now basically running expeditions, he's been there through all our lives, showing us what's there, and now more recently having the most powerful voice to look what we've done and we need to do something about. So I think in any capacity, whether it be a cup of coffee or a mountain camp or anything, a bit like Antarctica, he would be my bucket list of people I would like to meet that I've actually potentially still got a chance to. He's beyond words, really.
I agree with all. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. What is your favourite piece of dive kit?
The thing is, I dive in so many different environments. Do you
have like a favourite hood or something like that?
Well, I use KO1 hoods, and the reason I use KO1 hoods, and I'm being very cautious not to turn this question into an advertising campaign, but there are a couple of things I must mention, because really I've always chosen kit on functionality. I don't care what colour it is, I don't care what it looks like. It's basically got a function, especially with what I do now, because most of what I do now is very long, very cold, very deep. And equipment failure is a serious thing. The reason that the KO1 hoods are so good, because they're made of extremely high quality Japanese neoprene, custom made to suit your head size, and it is just the most comfortable. I get a lot of jaw problems, broke my jaw when I was young. I get none of that jaw pain from being encased in the hood for hours. And the comfort and warmth is just, par excellence.
5 mil?
I've got a 7. Because I do a lot of cold water diving, and it's literally never been cold in it, and so it's a brilliant bit of kit. I do have a particular favourite bit of kit, but it's a bit odd. I have a Loitakari. Now, a Loitakari is a handmade Finnish rubber suit.
Right.
It's a dry hood, so the hood seals across the forehead, over the cheeks, and down under the bottom lip. The inside of the hood is lined with ribbed merino wool. There is no neck seal, because you've got a dry hood. The hands are 3-fingered mittens, in my case, with no wrist seals. It's made of very thick, heavy-duty vulcanized rubber with a cloth lining, and it is quite simply the warmest dry suit you can use. It's not for the masses. You wouldn't be able to use it for normal diving. Most of the things we've talked about, like the Tulsa American and the Grubshunden and the Antikythera wreck, completely unsuitable. It's for very cold, very long, Baltic and Arctic type conditions. So I use it maybe once a year on my 4-week trip to the Scandinavian mines. But back to my OCD, it's kind of a bit steampunk. It's a bit odd.
So do you still inflate the same means?
Still inflate the same, still dump the same, still got the inlet for heating and what have you. it's a specialist piece of equipment for very specialist dives. So it represents maybe 10% of my year I'm using this suit, but I like it, in answer to your what's your favourite bit of kit, because it's odd.
So what do you normally dive in if you're not doing anything extreme?
Santee. I've been in Santee for over 12 years now. Again, not wanting to turn the answer to this question into a sales pitch, but the guys at Santee have been absolutely phenomenal with me. They custom built to our design suits for the J2 project. They've kept me dry and warm for the last 12 plus years. Thomas, the owner specifically. My original suit was still fully functional. It went back last year simply because it looked so old, and they've replaced it with a newer version of the same, but there was nothing wrong with it. The quality, the functionality, it's just a phenomenal piece of equipment. I don't even think of that as dive kit. It's just so part of me. It's like, I just put it on and dive. It's such a good piece of kit. The Loiter Curry was a bit more of a kind of left field answer, because it's a bit of an odd that sits in a bag.
First one we've had anyway, so thanks very much for that.
It sits in a bag for 11 months of the year, comes out, gets used for 1 month of the year where it's absolutely essential. Then I dust the whole thing down with talc.
How do you get on with your 3 fingers being joined? Is that ever an issue?
I had to teach myself to dive again. So bear in mind, the sort of dives I'm doing with this suit, I'm probably running average 5 stages, a DPV, a rebreather. So once I got the suit, it was like in the local quarry for hours and hours and hours to learn how to rotate and handle multiple stages, scooter controls, rebreather controls, rebreather failure drills. But you get used to it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
The good thing is on Deco, you can hold this, pull this finger out and put it in with the others. So on Deco, you can actually have all the fingers together, which how you keep them warm. Mittens are so much warmer than gloves because of that reason. The fingers
keep them all together. Good idea.
So it's a very specialist, very unusual, very rarely used bit of kit, but it's one of my favourites.
Yeah, it's good to hear what it is.
Good answer. Last question. You're a man that's travelled the world, and you've been to some of the most remotest and extreme places in the world. So if you've got a chance now, you've got a billboard, and you're going to put something on that billboard. It can be an image, it can be a question, it can be a statement, it can be whatever you like. What you want to use that billboard for? What are you going to put on it?
Wow, that is a tough statement. I think actually I could probably just summarize it, and I'd like to point out to the audience that this you can probably tell by me hesitating to answer this question and some of the other questions, like finally coming up with Attenborough. These questions aren't preloaded. I asked about 2 weeks ago, can you send me the questions, and both Gemma and Ian said no, and that's made this particular podcast quite special, because it does make you think on the feet. So now I've had time to think about that, I would simplify that down to one word. I would put it in bold, underlined, with a big stripe of highlighter over it, and it would simply say explore. And each person who reads that, everyone can do to their own capabilities, desires, and those capabilities and desires can expand with time or contract with time, but you're never too young or too old, and whatever nationality, whatever you are, you can explore, even if it's exploring self. So that billboard would simply say explore.
And I'll tell you why. Christina Sonata, when she came on, she taught us 3 words: explore, educate, and conservation.
Fabulous.
And somebody else actually taught us another one on Monday night, and that was transform. And those 3 words, particularly those 3 words, I think, we certainly use them quite a lot now in our podcast, and I think actually it is for life. They're really good, and explore is a brilliant one. It's a word that I think good choice of word.
Yeah, great answers, Phil. Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, we like that.
Cool.
Yeah. So I suppose just the final question is like, what's your plans for the rest of the year or the coming year after COVID?
Okay. All of the current situation we're in permitting, our current plans are a return to phase 2 of the Gribshunden wreck. Gribshunden is a Danish king's flagship from 1495. She's in the Baltic Sea. She's absolutely intact because she's in anoxic, low saline, freezing cold water. We worked on her through August, September last year for just under a month and recovered some remarkable artefacts. Ongoing research is taking place with those within the laboratories of Lund, Gothenburg and Sotterton universities, and we were due back on her this year. We're hoping to get out in September, certainly for a survey season, if not another excavation season. Then we'll definitely be back on her next year. So that's our biggest ongoing project at the moment. Looking forward to that. We've already discussed the B-17. Very keen to get back on that, and hopefully to recover another fallen war hero and send him home to his family very much. And then basically we have other similar aircraft wreck projects, some of which in Scandinavia now, to do the same job on, which is basically going to be moving into next year. And for me, caves. Basically, if you give me a day off, I want to be in a hole in the ground. So anywhere I can find a hole in the ground, that's where you'll find me.
You should be on Lord of the Rings.
Well, one of my nicknames has been Gollum or Smeagol over the years. Passing resemblance, no hair, big ears, big goggly eyes, and a preference on the ground, and I like fish. So, it is what it is.
So if for people who are now listening to us and they're listening to you for the first time and they want to keep up to date with what you're up to, where are they best to go to keep up to date with what you're up to, and where are you on social media?
Most up to date Facebook page, Phil Short Technical. My company's Facebook page is Dark Water Exploration. So mostly the commercial projects go on the Dark Water page. My daily diving and caving life goes on the Phil Short Technical page. The Instagram version of that is Phil Short Explorer, and my website is darkwaterexploration.com. But I think the most used and the most up to date of just everything is the Phil Short Technical Facebook.
That's great.
Okay, thank you very much. Excellent.
Yeah, that's been really good, Phil. It's just very inspiring talk again. Yeah.
Well, seriously, for you, have a fabulous time. Enjoy your first dives. And hopefully, I really hope you get out to the sea on the Sunday, because you'll be fine if you have to do the first both days in a quarry. Never mind, but you can find the magic in every dive. And for me, that first dive in Stony Cove. It was Stony Cove in February in a wetsuit that didn't fit, and it was a wetsuit, not a semi-dry. And I went down to that aircraft cockpit and saw a perch swim past me, and I was like, wow, there's a fish next to it. So you can find a bit of magic in every dive. So really enjoy it, and I hope it's fabulous, and stick at it.
Yeah, well, we'll be posting about it on our social media. But and your advice, perfect. Yeah,
you've been brilliant, Phil. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Take care, guys. I look forward to seeing the podcast once you launch it. But take care.
Brilliant.
We'll
Thanks
keep
for your
in touch.
time.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Phil.
Now that does wrap up today's episode of the Big Scuba podcast. But if you want to hear more from the podcast, make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button depending on what platform you are listening on. That way you will never miss an episode from us. But if you are listening on Apple Podcasts and did enjoy what you heard today, we would really appreciate it if you head to the show page to leave a 5-star rating and review. It really does help us. If you do, please take a screenshot of that review and send it to us on Instagram, and we'll give you a shout out to say a big thank you. If you have any questions for us or anything that has been mentioned in today's episode, be sure to reach out to us on any of our social media platforms or send us an email. The links are in the show notes. We will get back to you no matter what. If you have made it to this point in the episode, we both want to say a big thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.